The evolution of the baseball card from its humble beginnings in the late 18th century to the modern day marvels we see today is a testament to the intersection of design, technology, and cultural significance. In tracing this journey, one can discern pivotal moments that shaped the trajectory of baseball card evolution and the emergence of innovative technologies that revolutionized their design. The earliest baseball cards were far removed from the glossy, vibrant collectibles adorning the shelves of today's enthusiasts. In the late 1800s, baseball cards were more akin to crude, hand-drawn portraits or illustrations, often printed on flimsy cardboard or paper. These primitive renditions served primarily as promotional tools for tobacco companies, packaged with their products to entice customers. The dawn of the 20th century ushered in a new era for baseball cards with the advent of lithography, a printing technique that enabled mass production with greater detail and color fidelity. This technological leap allowed for the creation of more visually appealing cards featuring player photographs and team logos, with more and more companies capitalizing on the baseball card market. However, it was not until the post-World War II era that baseball cards truly began to resemble their modern counterparts. The introduction of offset printing and improved photographic processes revolutionized card production, resulting in sharper images and richer colors. Topps, a company that emerged as a dominant force in the industry, spearheaded this transition with its groundbreaking 1952 set, which boasted vibrant designs and introduced the iconic Topps baseball logo. The 1980s witnessed another quantum leap in baseball card design with the advent of computer technology. Digital imaging and graphic design software empowered manufacturers to push the boundaries of creativity, resulting in cards adorned with intricate patterns, holographic foils, and even embedded memorabilia pieces. I'm your host, Gavin Figert, and this is the story of the history of design, technology, and culture within the baseball card industry.
We're taking the afternoon off. It's a beautiful day for a ball game today. The fans are out to get a ticket.
To answer those questions, we have to go back to the beginning. The year 1865. The country is in disarray from 4 years of fighting against each other, but not even a civil war can stop man's love for baseball. In 1865, the Brooklyn Atlantics passed out a card which included a picture of their 9 players and coach to their fans, proclaiming their newfound title as champions of America, and thereby created the first baseball card. Now, this obviously looks a lot different from the type of baseball cards that we have come to know, and it even lacks a resemblance to the cards that would be released in the coming years. In fact, there are many cards in this style from the late 60s and 70s that some will call baseball cards, and some simply won't. There are certain design standards that these cards simply do not meet, with its 4-inch by 2.5-inch dimensions and team picture as opposed to individual portrait. This card was also printed on a cheap piece of paper using a technique called albumen printing. The man who last auctioned this card off, David Thibodeau, described this as more of a piece of photography than a baseball card. And it certainly makes sense that the team distributed the card with that mindset, not even imagining what the world of baseball cards could be. Commentary on this card was assisted by Source 1, the Library of Congress, Source 2, the Lethal Alliance Between Baseball and the Cigarette, and Source 3, the blog of Keith Olbermann.
Triple's okay. We're gonna cheer and boo and raise a hullabaloo at the ball game today.
To find the first cards that most certainly meet the requirements to be called baseball cards, we have to fast forward 22 years to the year 1887, when the tobacco company Allen Ginter began to include a sport card in each of their packages. Their set of cards represented 7 different sports, but included 10 cards devoted to baseball. To actually break the third wall here for a sec, I want to talk really quickly about a set of cards released just last year that inspired this entire episode. The Topps Allen Ginter set is a collaboration between the first baseball cards and the best baseball cards. The set includes current players and legends, all with a vintage design style that would fit right in with the original Allen and Ginter cards from the 1800s.
It's a really cool card. Jackie Robinson. Many know who Jackie Robinson is because he was the first black baseball player to play in the MLB. Truly a legend on and off the field.
I just think this set and the concept that comes with it is so cool. The way that it creates a circle around the history of baseball card design for me in this podcast is also very much appreciated. Going back to 1887, what we would see over the next 3 years would mark a legendary run for baseball cards, finding their way into most every single pack of cigarettes in the nation. Companies like Bushner, Gypsy Queen, Old Judge, and my personal favorite, Yum Yum Tobacco, all began to include these cards, each taking a different design approach to them. Some favored showing off the players. Some instead plastered their name all over the card. Some printed in color and some in black and white. If done in color, the original design was most likely a painting and therefore included a simplified background, but black and white cards were a one-to-one printing job from the photo negative and therefore were able to faithfully represent the background of the image. The design strategy of these cards is very much defined by the abilities of the printing process. This means simple characters, minimal text, and a lack of detail in the background. But the most interesting difference to me is the sizes. The design choice that was made when it came to the size of these cards was most likely reflecting the size of each company's packaging. Therefore, it is not in the slightest bit consistent across companies. But one thing that was consistent was that the front side of the card was at least mostly focused on the player, while the back side of the card was entirely left to advertising the company. Now, as I mentioned previously, baseball cards were not the only type of card that tobacco companies included in their products. In fact, the origin of tobacco cards goes back to 1875. But these cards almost never had any correlation to the tobacco products themselves, but instead attached the company name to popular names, faces, activities, and companies to do anything they could to get their name known. Furthermore, with these cards being inserts, it was not seen as necessary to print these on the highest qualities of paper or using the highest quality of printing. So speaking of printing, for these cards, companies primarily use two processes: chromolithograph and albumin. Chromolithograph was used for the cards that were printed in color and is a process that can be compared to modern-day screen printing. The ink was pressed on in colored layers by painting on each individual color on an individual sandstone, and then pressing each sandstone onto the card and creating the image. This is why the backgrounds were often simplified or solid colors, as it simply was not worth the effort to paint in details anywhere that wasn't on the player. Albumin was then used for black and white cards and was a common photographic printing process of the time. It involved floating a piece of paper in a mixture of egg and salt and then floating it in a silver nitrate mixture, thereby creating a piece of quote-unquote photo paper that the photo negative would then be transferred onto.
Strike one! Hey, the game has just begun, and the home team's out to win. Very sweet! Strike two! And the pitcher's dipsy-do, genius fastball pop right.
The next 30 years marked what I would describe as the most formative years in the design history of baseball cards. What we really see here is the evolution towards the kind of card that we are used to in 2024. The formation of elements that would remain staples of baseball cards throughout history, and design becoming an obvious emphasis. Because of the prosperous achievements of this era, it has been dubbed by many to be the golden age of baseball card history. The T206 Honus Wagner has not just etched its way into baseball card history, but it's etched its way into all of history as a cultural icon, earning the title the Holy Grail of card collecting. Now, Honus Wagner was one of the greats of his time, but it wasn't his on-the-field play that led to this card's notoriety, and it certainly wasn't the excellent design of the card, as the solid background and simple composition are nothing to write home about. But it was his off-the-field actions that revealed his great character. Now, much of the story of this card has been shrouded in mythology, but the most popular story goes that Wagner, although a smoker himself, did not want his image to be used in the promotion of the American tobacco brand, as he feared his image as a baseball player and role model would mean the cigarettes would be promoted to children. The problem was that American Tobacco had already begun to print and put the Wagner card in their products, so by the time Wagner could stop the production, it is estimated that around 50 to 200 of these cards were in circulation. Today, there are really only a handful of T206 Wagners that are known about, and the handful that are known are some of the most valuable pieces of paper in the entire world. I'm not making this up, the last sale of the T206 Honus Wagner sold for $7.25 million. That's million with an M. Commentary on this card was assisted by Source 4, the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and Source 5, How a Baseball Card Reached the Big Leagues. So we're now in the golden age, and what you're really going to want to look for here is a progression towards creativity, bringing with it the brighter colors and new compositions that put a focus on the player rather than the company. Also, new types of companies are taking their shot at baseball cards. These cards are definitely still being used as inserts into products, but they are starting to solidify themselves as an independent industry and as genuine collectibles. The design strategy of Golden Age cards shows an evolution in printing technology, as the path is now clear for higher quality prints. Higher quality prints means the inclusions of more detailed backgrounds and more accurate player likeness, even in a full body composition like the 1933 Goody Babe Ruth card. Another seemingly small detail that represents a much larger shift is the fact that on the back of this card, more than half of the card is devoted to a player biography, with the Babe Ruth biography including a short synopsis of his career to that point and the way that Babe brought American baseball to the spotlight. This is contrary to the tobacco cards that came before, as the entire back of those cards was reserved for advertising the company. Here, just around 20% of the card is given to advertising the company. And finally, the new printing technology allowed for much brighter and more saturated colors and a wider color range. In this image of the Babe, you can see the work of gradients and subtle color shifts playing their parts in the overall design. So I mentioned how new types of companies are taking their shot on baseball card inserts into their products. And I think the significant part about this is that the products of these new companies are starting to become a bit more relevant to the game of baseball, as well as more kid-friendly. Tobacco companies definitely still had their stake in the game and would until 1940, but the new companies were the ones who brought some of the more famous sets from this time. Companies like Cracker Jack, who to this day sell ballpark snacks, the Goody Gum Co., who like their name suggests sell bubblegum, an essential baseball product, and Willard's Chocolates, selling a kid-friendly product, and many more companies like these. Once again, the sizing of the cards themselves uniquely reflect the products they are advertising. Tobacco cards are still small and skinny, chocolate cards are as well, but bubblegum cards had the liberty of widening out a bit and showing more of the players themselves. To this point, most cards are being printed in color, so albumin printing has largely been left behind, but chromolithograph printing was still very much one of the primary methods of printing these baseball cards. Alongside chromolithograph, a new form of lithography, known as offset lithography, also gets put into use. Invented in 1875 by Robert Barclay, offset lithography prints with a similar method as chromolithography, but speeds up the process by utilizing these cylindrical rotaries as opposed to sandstones. What this means is that both the process of resetting a print and the by hand aspect are mostly removed. This process resets itself and presses itself, only requiring an operator to feed in the ink. Removing the hand-printed aspect also results in a more consistent print. Heat stamping and letterpress also find their way into the conversation as more text and information finds its way onto the cards themselves. This process goes all the way back to the 15th century. Johannes Gutenberg, who is a very well-known name in the creative industries, created the first mechanized printing press, and even printed one of the most well-known Bibles in all of history, the Gutenberg Bible. His press allowed the repeated impressions of an inked stamp to be applied to the hundreds of baseball cards that were being printed at a time.
Genius fastball pop right in. This is it. They're right free. Fans are tearing up the chairs.
World War II cast a profound shadow over the world of baseball cards, much like it did over many other aspects of society. But the importance of baseball in society was substantial, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt understood this when he famously urged Major League Baseball to persevere during the trying times, as he wanted to maintain morale on the home front. But despite FDR's encouragement, the war undeniably took its toll on the MLB, with many players answering the call to serve their country. The removal of star players to military service dealt a significant blow to the league, disrupting team rosters and diluting the quality of play. The disruption reached all the way to the baseball card industry, impacting the availability of player photographs and statistics that were essential for card production. Moreover, the scarcity of resources during wartime imposed constraints on printing and manufacturing processes, further hampering the production of baseball cards. While efforts were made to sustain interest in baseball through various means, including exhibition games and fundraising events, the absence of top-tier talent undoubtedly diminished the sport's allure. This downturn in excitement and engagement inevitably trickled down to the realm of baseball cards, with collectors experiencing a lack of new releases and a stagnation in innovation. So America is in the thick of World War II, and even with the request from the president for baseball to continue, fears that play would be put on hold were great. The players were not safe from the draft, and many of them served willingly. The result of this effort was unfortunate for the MLB, but something really special resulted. Several league executives formed a league known as the AAGPBL, or the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and America loved it. The AAGPBL garnered hundreds of thousands of fans. Now, unfortunately, for the same reason that baseball cards on the men's side saw a massive dip in production, cards were not made for the women. But post-war history has brought many companies who have created cards commemorating the women who played in the AAGPBL and recognizing their place in history. Commentary on these cards was assisted by Source 6, the blog of Lisa McElroy. Well, they say you have to go through the wilderness to enter the promised land, and baseball cards, I think, would certainly agree with that saying. The post-war baseball card industry immediately refound its footing after years of trials and tribulation, and it is in no small part of what I would consider the first baseball card companies of Topps and Bowman. I call these the first baseball card companies because, unlike their predecessors, their focus was on baseball cards and not other products. Both of these companies did start off just like Goody Bubblegum Co., simply including baseball cards as inserts in their gum packs, but both Topps and Bowman realized the possible market of baseball cards and made the decision to move from being bubblegum companies that included baseball cards to baseball card companies that included bubblegum. This marks what I believe to be the final shift that was necessary to move baseball cards from advertisements to collectibles, from a hobby to a passion. One of many great things that resulted from these companies largely taking over the industry was a much needed standardization of what the baseball card was. Standardization that defined the quote-unquote official size and printing qualities of these cards. Now, it is no accident that you probably recognize the Topps brand, as they are to this day one of the biggest names in the industry. And what I want you to notice when looking at the Topps versus Bowman cards is the clear difference in image quality. Where Bowman cards resemble more of what we expect from Golden Age cards, Topps cards included extremely detailed and accurate images of the players. Where Bowman cards have different designs from year to year, there's a sense of continuity throughout the years for the Topps cards. Because of this breath of fresh air that Topps offered the consumer, it's easy to see why they immediately became the top dog in the baseball card industry, and to this day have maintained that status. But what made Topps' image so much crisper? Look no further than the adoption of halftone printing. Invented by Frederick Ives in 1881, halftone printing separated photonegatives into a series of microscopic dots, allowing for very great detail. The real difference between halftone and lithography techniques is the ability to create gradients and transitions that are essentially seamless. Where before the cards would appear more like glorified paint by numbers, halftone images cannot be visually separated without bringing the card entirely too close to your eye. With the use of halftone prints, the design of these cards is clearly finding its footing. All of the timeless elements of baseball cards are now consistently included. These timeless elements being a hero image, player name, position, team logo, and now a full player biography on the backside of this card. The player biography includes the previous included paragraph, but now includes a full table of player statistics and often fun jokes or facts about the player. To make room for the statistics table, some cards even began to present horizontally on the back. The only card in contention with the T206 Wagner for most valuable card of all time, the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. Now, to put it in perspective, PSA, which is the go-to company for grading trading cards, said that this card is more of a pop culture art than a baseball card. So this card's prevalence extends all the way to the arts. It shows up on t-shirts, posters, and movies. This card is just everywhere. And for what it is, the design of the card is relatively simple. Where many cards of this era are revolutionizing the design of baseball cards, this card actually goes back a few steps, having a solid colored background and a color range that is nothing special. I do find it interesting that Mantle signature is included here, and this is something that we are going to begin to see more of throughout modern card history. Everybody wants a player's signature. Once again, what makes this card so valuable is the story behind it. In 1986, this guy named Ted Lodge just so happens to find in his father's attic a crate of 5,500 cards from the 1952 Topps set, including many of these Mickey Mantles. And these cards are untouched, in pristine condition. Now, Lodge's father was a driver of Topps products in the 50s, and it was widely known that the distribution of this 1952 set was fumbled. Apparently, this guy's dad just kept a crate of these cards in his basement, which is where they sat for 34 years. Commentary on this card was assisted by Source 7, ESPN, and Sources 8 and 9, both being PSA.
It's a beautiful day for a ball game today.
As with most everything else in the world, the innovations in the baseball card industry of the modern era have come quickly and consistently. Due to innovations of technology, we just simply have more to work with here. From holographic cards to actually including pieces of players' game-worn jerseys inside the card, there's a lot to unpack. So it is true that a lot can change in 60 years, and I think these cards pretty clearly prove that. But I don't want to just brush over the 80s cards in favor of the flashiness of the 2000s cards. Because the pre-2000s cards are really uniquely focused on designing the card borders. And seemingly every set had a new special border, but they were still able to maintain all the staple information for each card. Another seemingly small but really large thing to notice here is that every single card here is 2.5 by 3.5 inches. The standardization for a baseball card is cemented in. That is until the craziness that is die-cut cards. But we will get into that in a minute. Surely the most unique set of baseball cards of all time. And what these cards really represent is an appreciation of the art that can go into baseball cards. The Topps Project 70 set brought in artists to really just do their thing and design cards that are inspired by or resemble iconic classic cards from the 70 years that Topps has been producing cards. The design of these cards cannot be put in a box like any other set. This set includes graffiti-style cards, cultural designs, player caricatures, and even comic book styles. This set is truly a special moment in the history of both baseball cards and in the world of design as a whole. Commentary on these cards was assisted by Source 10, Topps. So a new face in the baseball card industry pretty quickly made its mark. Upper Deck came out with their first set in 1989 and just 2 years later revolutionized the entire industry with the release of holographic cards like this Hank Aaron here. Essentially, what a holographic card is a shiny card, and everyone likes shiny. These holographics would quickly begin to find their way into every set of baseball cards and represent this new idea of a rarity hierarchy that begins to find its way into sets in the form of specially designed or printed cards. And this process of making cards shiny was done through holographic embossment. This technique was invented by Dennis Gaber in 1947 and is achieved by pressing a thin layer of silver or gold aluminum onto the card. Something interesting to note with holographic cards is that there is almost always both a regular version and a holographic version of each card with the same design. So the designer of the card would have to take into account when designing the cards themselves. Not everything that works visually for a matte card is going to work visually for a shiny card, and not everything that works visually for a shiny card is going to work visually for a matte card. The second unique form of card that begins production in the modern era are these die-cut cards that can really take any shape that the designer wants them to. But the shape always represents something about the card. This Nolan Ryan example was a part of the Topps 70th anniversary celebration, and so was a part of a series of cards that were cut into the shape 70. But these cards have been cut into an X, a diamond shape, simulating burnt edges, and many, many more. The special part about these cards is the approach that the designer had to go through to create the composition while still including all of the necessary information. This, like holographic cards, are another form of rarity that is included in the hierarchy. And the final addition to the rarity hierarchy is my favorite of the bunch, relic cards. These relic cards include anything from a game-worn sock to the skin of a baseball that someone pitched with, and I think these are just awesome. So did everybody else, as they very quickly became fan favorites. This doesn't surprise me though. Everybody wants a piece of the game. But these cards inherently have a controversial history. Essentially, what was believed to have been the process was the manufacturer would receive a game-worn jersey or the other game-used artifact and cut them into these little squares to embed in the card. These squares could include buttons, patches, stains, really anything that was on the artifact had a chance to make it in the mix. But it was soon realized how easy of a fib this could be to sell, and investigations revealed that the relics being included in the cards might not actually be game-worn or game-used. This was heartbreaking to many fans that before believed they were touching something that their favorite player had worn. Eventually, a verification process was required for these relics, and there is much more hope today that all of the relic cards are genuine and game-used. So the major addition from the modern era cards that's more important than all of the design innovations is the utilization of these design innovations and print styles to create a sense of card hierarchy and make some cards more desirable than others. This era has clearly been the most creative era and therefore the most design heavy. But with human nature, we always have a desire to go back to the way things once were, a nostalgia for the cards of old. And that brings this story full circle back to the Topps Allen Ginter set that inspired this whole episode. A set of modern players and modern printing techniques, but with vintage designs, and even in a sense turning baseball cards all the way back into advertisements. I love this set. I love the idea behind it. And I hope that now that you know the history of baseball cards, that you can have an appreciation for this set as well. We even pulled a relic card. I am now the proud owner of a piece of Randy Arozarena's jersey. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough down the history of design in baseball cards, and I hope you learned something. I know I did.
It's a beautiful day for a ball game today.
Now my works cited is kind of long, so bear with me. For our first source, the Library of Congress, title The Earliest Known Baseball Card, from Baseball Americana, Origins and Early Days, the Library of Converse, www.loc.gov/exhibitions/about-the-early-dash-known-baseball-card. For our second source, Keith Olbermann, post-tagged Harry Wright, Keith Olbermann, the baseball nerd, Major League Baseball Advanced. For our third source, Peter Morris, quote, personally, I have nothing against smoking, end quote. The Lethal Alliance Between Baseball and the Cigarette. Produced by Nine, a Journal of Baseball History and Culture, Volume 18, Number 1, 2009, pages 37 through 62. From Project Muse. https://doi.org/10.1353/nin.0.0078. For our fourth source, the National Baseball Hall of Fame, titled Honus is on You, from the Baseball Hall of Fame, the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, https://baseballhall.org/discover-more/stories/honus-is-on-you. For our fifth source, Craig Britcher, title How a Baseball Card Reached the Big Leagues, from Museum Exhibits Associate of Heinz History Center, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, released in 2004. For our sixth source, the blog Captive Wild Woman, titled All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, from Captive Wild Woman in 2013. captivewildwoman.blogspot.com/2013/08 all-american-girls-professional.html. For our seventh source, ESPN, title 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card sells for $12.6 million, shattering record, from ESPN in 2022. www.espn.com/MLB/story/ID/3447362/1952-Tops-Mickey-Mantle-card-cells-126-million-shattering-record. Source 8, PSA, title Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps number 311, from PSA Card Facts. www.psaCard.com/baseball-cards/1952-tops/Mickey-Mantle-311/23330. Source 9, PSA, title PSA Set Registry, 1953 Topps Baseball Cards, Works of Fine Art, from PSA Articles. www.psaCard.com/articles/article-view/5161/PSA-set-registry-1953-tops-baseball-cards-works-fine-art. Source 10, Topps, title Project 70, from Topps. www.topps.com/pages/project70. Source 11, the Library of Congress, title About the Baseball Cards Collection, from the Library of Congress. www.loc.gov/collections/baseball-20 issued, used, %20 them, %22, %20 PR, OMOTE, %20 sales. Source 12, Library of Congress, title Baseball Cards 1887-1914, card sets in chronological order, from the Library of Congress. www.loc.gov/articles-1887-1914, Source 13, Phil Coffin, When Baseball Was Still Topps, Portraits of the Game in 1959, card by card, published in December 25th, 2023. Source 14, authored by both Peter Devereaux and the Library of Congress, title Game Faces, Early Baseball Cards from the Library of Congress, published on October 23rd, 2018. Source 15, title Baseball Cards, Historic Highs and Lows, from the Museum of Play blog. www.museumofplay.org/blog/baseball-cards-historic-highs-and-lows/. Source 16, title Topps Transformed Baseball Cards from Hobby to Passion, from the Baseball Hall of Fame. www.baseballhall.org/discover/Topps-transformed-baseball cards from hobby to passion. Source 17. Authored by Dusan C. Stulik and Art Kaplan. Title Halftone. From the Atlas of Analytical Signatures of Photographic Processes. Sponsored by the Getty Conservation Institute. Published in 2013.